Good afternoon. I'm going to wait just a couple minutes to let people come on for Facebook Live. So this is when I should have some background music going. Um, there are a couple jokes that the kids at the school told me today, and I'm terrible at remembering. Oh wait, here's one. Um, what has 18 legs and catches flies? I'm usually terrible at remembering jokes. So what has 18 legs and catches flies? Baseball players. A team of, right, 9? Anyway, I thought that was kind of cute. That's the only one I can remember. So now there's elevator music going on in the background, we will imagine. Well, let me jump right to it. Welcome to our Lenten Wednesday Bible study. This is number 5. This is the 5th one we've done so far. It's hard to believe. What's great about having both in person and online is all of what we've been doing since March of 2020 is now online. So Bible studies, and so you could always go back and mark things or catch up, and that's been a really wonderful blessing. This upcoming Sunday will be March 28th, and it will be Palm Sunday. Palm Sunday at Lutheran World Church is always a very special one. It won't be quite the same this year because we're transitioning back to some normalcy. But I have found Palm Sunday at Lutheran World Church is just very festive and one of the highlights to me of the entire church year. So maybe it won't quite be like that this year, but I trust in 2022 that it will be. But it will be a much better Palm Sunday this year than last one. So we have that to be grateful for. Okay. So what I did was I provided the readings. First reading on Palm Sunday is Isaiah chapter 50, verses 4 through 9. Psalm 31, 9 through 16. And then second reading is Philippians chapter 2, verses 5 through 11. For those of you who have been participating in the Lenten worship beginning at 12:05, you know that has been our focus reading. We've been reading it each and every Wednesday, and then the meditation has been on that. So by the time we arrive at Palm Sunday, those of you who have been a part of that, I trust that it takes on an increasing amount of significance. And then our gospel lesson is Mark chapter 11, verses 1 through 11. Now, what I also provided, this was a study that I did several years ago here, is I wanted to also show you on the landscaped page the other gospels and how they account for Palm Sunday. And I'm not going to get too much into comparing the differences this year, but what's really kind of neat to do is have the Mark passage in your left hand and have the Matthew, John, and Luke passages in your right, and just sort of look to see whether they're similar or where they're different. Maybe underline, and then in your own study you can dig around to find out why those differences are there and what that means theologically. Okay? So I'm not going to spend too much time going through that, but I at least wanted to provide that different resource for you. Final thing before we jump into our lessons for today is, I would say, over the last 5 to 6 years at Lutheran World Church, at least 6, we only celebrate Palm Sunday on Palm Sunday. And what's happened sometimes, and if you're confused about this or wondering why I'm not covering the Passion text, often in the church this is a combined Sunday. There's a lot going on. Palm Sunday and Passion Sunday. And I think what happened was they meaning whoever sort of leads the way the church flows through the calendar, saying to themselves that not everybody goes to church on Good Friday. So where can the Passion be read? Well, let's put it back into Palm Sunday. So what happened back then was Palm Sunday became so much, became the procession with the palms and the palm text, and then the Passion was read. But to me, that was just completely out of order. And I just felt that it's better to me just to focus on Palm Sunday, and then the Passion will be read on Good Friday, which is when it should be read. So I trust that all of you will be worshiping with us on Good Friday. So a lot of ways to go. Let's start with the Mark passage, and if we have time, then I'll look at the Isaiah passage, believing that we covered the Philippians passage pretty well over the last 5 weeks. So I'm going to read Mark's Gospel, chapter 11, verses 1 through 11, which will be our gospel text for Sunday. When they were approaching Jerusalem at Bethphage and Bethany, near the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent 2 of his disciples and said to them, "Go into the village ahead of you, and immediately as you enter it, you will find tied there a colt that has never been ridden. Untie it and bring it. If anyone says to you, 'Why are you doing this?' just say this, 'The Lord needs it, and will send it back here immediately.'" They went away and found a colt tied near a door outside in the street. As they were untying it, some of the bystanders said to them, "What are you doing untying the colt?" They told them what Jesus had said, and they allowed them to take it. Then they brought the colt to Jesus and threw their cloaks on it, and he sat on it. Many people spread their cloaks on the road, and others spread leafy branches that they had cut in the fields. Then those who went ahead and those who followed were shouting, "Hosanna! Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the coming kingdom of our ancestor David. Hosanna in the highest heaven." Then he entered Jerusalem and went into the temple. And when he looked around at everything, as it was already late, he went out to Bethany with the 12. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. So, as I had introduced that would be the procession gospel text. And then we would then, on a Palm Passion Sunday, we would then read the Passion for the gospel. But what I did was move that. This is our gospel for Sunday. So just in terms of a reference, I'm grateful for research and textual commentaries, adding to my own study. Today I'm going to be drawing on some resources from Callie Plunkett Brunton and Brian Stoffergen. So thank you to them. So as I had shared at the introduction, you have before you all of the palm texts for all 4 Gospels. It's interesting. Let's just talk about a few of the main topics of what Palm Sunday is about. So one of the questions is, what are the crowds carrying? As we come into church, we're given palms, and we may want to know a little bit more as to why. You should know and will know now that it is only in John's Gospel that it mentions branches of palms. Okay? So only in John's Gospel specifically uses the word palms. In Mark's Gospel, which is our lesson for Sunday, notice that the disciples cut leaves from the field. Okay, now it doesn't say specifically palms, but leaves from the field. In Matthew, they cut off branches from the trees. And in Luke's Gospel, there's no branches of any kind in Luke. So when you're on Jeopardy and you're asked the question, what Gospel speaks specifically of palms, you will answer John. So whatever the crowds, though, were carrying, whether they're the branches or the leaves or the palms, what is it that these mean, right? What's the significance of it theologically? And there's really nothing quite like this within the Old Testament itself. There's a few suggestions, and one of them that I'd like to raise is the actions that are being described in John's Gospel resemble one of the standard processions of the Festival of the Tabernacles. This is one of the Jewish festivals where the people carried twigs of myrtle and willow and palm. Originally, these were used in the construction of the booths. Remember, people are traveling to Jerusalem for these festivals, and there's no hotels, and there's crowds of people who are coming to Jerusalem to be at the temple. So they need shelter. So what do? They might be carrying their own supplies to create a temporary shelter, but they're creating a booth or a tabernacle, one would say. If you want to look a little bit more specifically where you can find some description of that, you can look in Nehemiah chapter 8, verses 13 through 18. Also, too, the second one, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but these are rather obscure books, at least what we're familiar with in our church, and that is about in Maccabees. In terms of Maccabees, there's the enemy troops in the Jerusalem fortress still could not go into the country to buy food, and many of them had starved to death as there's a siege going on. Finally, the survivors begged Simon for peace. He agreed, and then ordered them to leave their fortress so that he could remove everything that made it unclean according to their religion. There are prayers that going on to make a place clean again, as you have foreign invaders coming into your sacred place. You need to purify it. You need to make it clean. And so there are certainly different ways of doing that, of building building an altar for sacrifices, and also too, again, having these shelters that are there, and sometimes the shelters are made with sticks and branches and also palms. So when people are gathered in Jerusalem, it is what is available, and as they are making the spaces holy again, they are singing psalms, psalms of praise with perhaps their palms, okay, waving them in thanksgiving. So nothing, that might be a little bit have been into the weeds there, or into the palms, but I thought that was kind of interesting to know at least a little bit more as well. Now, the final thing that I wanted to talk about before I get into some other things in Mark's Gospel specifically is about these animals. If you read the 4 accounts of Palm Sunday, you're going to notice some distinctions and differences with the animals. So what about the animals in the passage as Jesus rides in on them, and what is it that they symbolize? Only Matthew and John make reference to the animals, and this comes from Zechariah chapter 9, verse 9. Okay, so only Matthew and John make reference to Zechariah 9:9. John's shorter quote avoids the strange situation of Jesus riding on a donkey and a colt. If you read I think it's the Matthew passage specifically, it talks about Jesus, let me find that, riding in on a donkey and a colt. And you've probably been in studies before. Yeah, in Matthew 21:5, tell the daughter of Zion, look, your king is coming to you humble and mounted on a donkey and on a colt, the foal of a donkey. So the image is Jesus has one foot on the donkey and one on the colt, and so he's riding in, kind of surfing in on the backs of it. Well, that's certainly not the case. It seems like although it seems like it's a reference to 2 animals, it's actually just repeating it for emphasis, and it's not 2 animals, but it's actually only 1 animal, which certainly makes more sense. But this again reemphasizes that sense of humility coming in, the aspect of a king who comes riding into town on his donkey. And as we know, as we've studied this passage before, and heard it on Sunday, Jesus, if nothing else, points to a posture of deep humility. As in the Philippians passage, he empties himself. One who can claim all things of God and power, he willingly empties himself and humbles himself for our needs and also benefit. Okay. So let's look at some more things of Mark's accounting for Palm Sunday as well. I get to where I need to get to here. All right. So Mark chapter 11, verse 1 through 11, shows Jesus as this long-awaited king. It does this on both obvious and subtle ways, with a heavy dose of both tension and irony. It helps to recall that for Mark, the very title Christ denotes royalty. So as Mark uses the term Christ, that means that he's going back and claiming royalty for Jesus. The Greek Christos, which Christos is the Greek word that is translated into English, that means Christ. And then the Hebrew, Masach, I love that guttural. Masach is meaning the anointed ones. So you have Masach, and then you have Christos, all the same thing. One is Hebrew, one is Greek, and then it is translated, Christos is translated into Christ, and then the Hebrew Masach is translated into Messiah. So Messiah and Christ are the same thing coming up out of two different languages, right? And this, whether it's Christ or Messiah, it's important to know that this is the one for whom the prophets proclaimed. This is the one who comes and is the one who will and does redeem all things. So again, Mark is really gravitating to this royal connotation when referring to Jesus as Christ/Messiah. So whenever you hear the word Christ or Messiah, I want you to think of the same thing. Again, and you've learned that they're transliterated out of two different languages, Greek and Hebrew. And this is very much in keeping with the relatively popular Second Temple Jewish hope. Now, you know this already, or if not, you're going to learn it. Remember that we have this hope of this restoration. Of course, the temple, that very center point, and that the Messiah, the Christos, will come to bring them back into those glory years and ages. So the Jewish people have this messianic hope. Certainly, not all of the Jewish people believe that Jesus is that one, but what we are seeing with the energy and the excitement on Palm Sunday, as we're going to listen to the text, I want you to think, if you're there, of somebody that you have long waited for and you're excited. He or she is the one who has been promised to make all things well. I think for the more cynical among us, we have discovered that maybe politicians would be thought to be those types of people, that they make all these types of promises, both Democrats, Independents, Republicans, right? I promise that I will do this, clean it up, whatever the promises are, and then with time we realize that they were not able to fulfill all those promises, not just because of their fault, but because of all the things that they're up against and the weaknesses that they bring into the job to themselves. So, but try to think, I don't know, it's hard to make a comparison, but just sort of think of somebody that you've long waited for. And that person is coming back. So you're excited and you're happy. And that's where we kind of move ourselves back into try to catch the image and the feelings of that day. Now, bearing all of this in mind, So the context, how it's rooted in this Jewish identity and this messianic hope, we can imagine how some of the characters inside this week's gospel might experience as Jesus' triumphal entry, bringing them one step closer to establishing his throne in the ancient city of kings. Remember, there was a long history of kingship that was in Jerusalem. You have this long list. You go to the book of Kings if you want to see all the kings. Of course, we have King David and King Solomon, and then there's a split. You have the northern kings and the southern kings, and there's some good kings in both, but then there's also bad ones, and so there's this constant back and forth. Well, so Jerusalem is very much a city of kings. So the star-struck disciples who have been following Jesus from the very beginning, for example, already know that Jesus is the Messiah. And I know there's some confusion, of course, with the disciples. They believe he's the Messiah, but remember, their Messiah is the one who will not die on a cross. So they're following Jesus, anticipating that he is going to restore the kingdom of Jerusalem into the way that it was and what they believed should be. So this is where this battle, where he starts to tell them that he's going to die, and they push it away, say, no, that's not what a Messiah is or does, and that's where the resistance. So they, in Mark chapter 8, verses 29 through 30, they know him to be the Messiah, but the problem is they don't understand what the Messiah is to do or to be. Now, while Jesus has not revealed his identity as Messiah to the general public, that was just reserved in Mark's gospel for the disciples, he has performed countless and marvelous acts under the banner of God's kingdom. And if you want to just reference a couple of them, you can go back and look at Mark chapter 1, verse 15. You can look at Mark chapter 4, verse 11. You could look at Mark chapter 4, verse 26, 30. And then finally, I'll give you one more. You could look at Mark chapter 9, verse 1. So he's revealing his identity to the small group, but he's not yet revealed it to the general public. But certainly through these signs and wonders that he's been doing, people have certainly been watching him very closely. So again, it is no wonder that by the time that Jesus arrives in Jerusalem for the Passover, his first and only visit in Mark, public opinion has turned decidedly messianic. Bystanders welcome Jesus into the city not only with the standard pilgrimage refrain of Psalm 118, verse 26. So write down that psalm. Psalm 118, verse 26, which says, "Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord." So on Sunday in our liturgy, when we say those words, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord," you who are part of this Bible study will know that it's not something that I made up, but it comes from Psalm 118, verse 26. And then, so I just love making those connections directly to Scripture. They're very important. So they also ceremoniously cover the ground in ways that signal Jesus' royal identity. This is a royalty, what we do for royals. We cover the road with cloaks, echoing the coronation of King Jehu of Israel in 2 Kings chapter 9, verse 13. And also with branches, echoing the conquering of Jerusalem by Simon Maccabeus. Remember at the beginning I was talking about the Maccabees? So that's kind of a direct reference, a more direct reference to what we see in Mark's gospel with Jesus coming in. So Simon Maccabeus is coming in, and they're laying down these branches. So surely there's all this exhilaration as he's coming in. And there's probably questions, right? How will God install him as the end-time king? Will he brandish a sword to destroy and to conquer the enemies? Will he summon this angelic host? Well, no. And this is where I think it's important. We've taken this for granted, that sudden letting the air out of the balloon. The expectations have not come forth, at least initially, because Jesus doesn't do all of those things, although he can, but he doesn't. And so this tragic irony of Good Friday is that Jesus is headed to a shameful execution, and he knows it. And that ties directly back to our well-studied and well-read passage of Philippians 2, the Christ hymn. Everything one needs to know as a summary about who Jesus is, his Christology, meaning his actions, why did he do the things that he did, is found within the Philippians 2, verses 5 through 11 passage, the Christ hymn. It is all there. Good to memorize if you are up for memorizing something. So Jesus knows that his unbridled approach to human wholeness has proven too disruptive and offensive for those that are wielding power. This is just too much for them. And then, so as we know, he is then moving towards death, a death that he empties himself, he chooses. But as we know, standing on this side of the resurrection, we can look back with that love, and we can see then the deeper meaning for his death. Okay? So that's just about a half an hour. Let me, just in the last couple minutes, see if I can find... oh yeah, the Isaiah chapter 50 passage is pretty interesting. Just a couple things that I wanted to raise for you as you're going to hear it on Sunday. Know that this is part of a larger poem, and don't cringe when thinking poetry, but it is part of a larger poem that extends to verse 11. So when you open your Bibles, read it through verse 11. And what the subject is about the servant of God. Now, we as Christians will read it back, and we will put Jesus in this role, right? And I'm not suggesting that we don't, but I'm also suggesting that we read it as well, that understanding the context of the time, that it wasn't just Jesus, that there are suffering servants. Suffering servants are one who have compelling and strong character about them. And what it is that they say and do is being rebuffed by those who are in power. And so those that are in power, although in a very limited way, will of course push back. We'll try to get rid of these people. And as I'm sharing this, as for those who study and read history, we understand that there are people throughout the ages who have been those very strong characters who have spoken truth to power, and as a result, they have been done away with, and they have died. So know that there are models of suffering servanthood. It's not just Jesus. Jesus is, of course, the pinnacle of suffering servanthood, but that also leaves room for us and for individuals. Not that we look for suffering, but when we are suffering, we understand that this is the role that God has given people. And it's a burden, I understand, but it also is not without purpose. There is a larger purpose. And at the time, we can't always see it, but we do trust in these hope and promises. Please notice again that there's no name that is given to this suffering servant, which gives again that room to not just put Jesus' name there, but again, to room that there are people that have been like this throughout the ages. This is not meant to associate with one particular person. So we need to be fair to the Hebrew Scriptures, and we need to take it for what it is and understand that. And also, there are 4 servant poems that are found in Isaiah, certainly in the larger part of Isaiah. And these servants, they are blameless individuals who are faithless to God, and it is unparalleled, and whose suffering is extreme. So they are blameless, and they are filled with God's truth. Thank you. I hope, although different this year, we have still been able to be fed by the living word. I thank you for those who are watching it live, but also thankful for those who will be watching it at any particular part of this day or in our future days. So peace be to all of you, and be well.